Hey guys, welcome to another one of my live streams. I've had a difficult week. I had 2 back-to-back surgeries and they left me really drained. Plus, I'm having issues where my blood pressure keeps dropping. It's gone as low as 75 over 54 and I go completely unresponsive. You can shake me, yell in my face, squirt me with water, sternal rub me, and I still won't wake up. I won't even flinch. We're working with the doctors to get to the bottom of this. I do have some exciting news too, though. Today I'm reading Under the Borderline, chapter 22, a chapter from Was I Ever Normal, my most recently published novel, and it is officially published as of August. This is Was I Ever Normal, and as you can see, it's a novel in verse, so it doesn't read like a regular novel. It reads almost like free verse poetry, but it doesn't rhyme and it doesn't have meter to it. It just flows. It's what I've been reading all along. Hi, Vivian. It's set out differently. You can buy it from Barnes & Nobles, Books A Million, Amazon.com, and multiple independent bookstores. The link to buy it from Barnes & Noble and Amazon.com is in the comment section. The book is available both as a paperback and as an ebook. So, back to Was I Ever Normal? Cassie is still trapped in the toxic environment of Bailey Hill Hospital, and she is losing whatever little control she ever had over her behavior. We will begin reading here. Vivian, will it ever be on audio? It will not be on audio because I would have to pay out of pocket to put it on audio, but I will continue reading it aloud through the whole thing. And if you go to my website, www.beccapava.org, you can see all the videos I've ever made, and so you can hear it on audio that way. So here, we'll begin reading here. The staff finally let me onto the quiet room. I was just walking past the nurse's station when one of the nurses started to get close to me. I knew she was going to try to hurt me. I knew she had orders to kill me. And I knew I wasn't going to let any of the horrible hospital staff do anything more to me. I had to be stronger and quicker than them. Before she could come at me, I aimed a hard kick straight at her large belly. But then, before I knew what was happening, she caught my leg and flipped me over to my stomach and held me there on the ground. By that point, I was as terrified as I was angry, worrying that they were going to try to inject me with poison. I started screaming and tried to fight them off. Things got a little blurry then. The next thing I was aware of was some big muscular staff holding me down on the urine-scented floor of the quiet room. He had my arm locked out behind my back, and every time I tried to move or squirm, I felt an intense shot of pain shoot through my whole body. I was crying because it hurt so bad, and because I was so scared and angry too. I found out later that staff member was using an illegal form of physical restraint. But at that point, I just thought that the staff were allowed to do whatever and that patients couldn't complain because everyone thought that we were just bad and crazy kids. At the second family meeting, Susan explained that they were worried that I was too out of control to go home. She pointed out the fact that in the last 3 years, I had been to 3 inpatient hospitals and had been admitted to the partial hospital multiple times. I think that what Cassie needs is a good residential program that specializes in treating teenagers with borderline personality disorder. We have one here that has worked really well with many kids. The program is a 12-month program. Susan talked on. I was losing my focus and my grip on reality. Voices were floating in and berating me for sinking so low that they were considering this. I knew if I hadn't lost control so many times, then they wouldn't have thought twice about sending me home. Fear gripped me by the throat. I struggled to breathe. I struggled to hear what Susan and my parents were saying. But the problem was that Bellingham and the others were so loud. You see, you loser girl. You screwed up one too many times. She sat in the meeting, her throat closing off all the air in her lungs as she slowly suffocated because her body was too scared to breathe. I fought back against the 2 voices, forcing my body to inhale and then exhale. Then I spoke, forcing out the words, one by one. It was hard to think in a straight enough line, to get the words to make sense. But I struggled to bring all my attention to my thoughts. I managed to get a coherent sentence out. I just want one more chance, please. My parents both turned to me. They looked at me for a long time, almost like they were judging my ability to go home and behave. I don't think we want to consider residential treatment quite yet. Are there any other options of outpatient therapy that we can consider? The meeting went on from there. My focus started from the voices to the people in the room. I was able to gather enough of what the people in the room were saying to figure out that they were going to give me another shot. They wanted me to do this dialectical behavioral therapy thing, and they were going to send me home soon, as they thought I was almost ready. When the meeting was over, I avoided my parents' hugs. I loved them a lot, but I was sick with anger at the fact that they still thought that I have borderline personality disorder, and that they didn't believe me about the voices and images that were so real to me. It was hard to fathom anyone doubting their existence. Oh, thanks, Elaine. I like this unicorn shirt too. The whole reason I'd gone to the hospital was to try and get help with the voices. And it was becoming more and more apparent that nobody would ever help me. Instead of hugging my parents, I ran off to my room. The look of hurt in their eyes was plain, and it sliced into me like a sharp knife. But I couldn't bring myself to go back and say goodbye to them. I just let that stupid Susan unlock the unit doors and let them out. My roommate was in my room when I barreled through the door and collapsed in hysterical tears on my bed. She looked up when I came in and asked what was wrong. I just shook my head. Lately, talking to other people just seemed too hard. I'm having a hard time too, she told me, with a sad look of defeat in her eyes. They want me to go home tomorrow, and I know I'm not ready. Besides, they want me to go back to that horrible group home I was in. They make things so much worse there. I just can't go back. I know I need to stay here longer. It took me several minutes to make her words fit together enough to make sense in my frazzled mind. When I finally figured out what she was saying, I gave her a sympathetic nod and then turned away. I focused my attention on the window near my bed. The wire was unraveling from the thick mesh that covered the glass of the window pane. I had been pecking at the wire for the last few days and using it to cut up my arms. I hated doing it, but Fellingham demanded the blood, and it was one of the few things that kept him quiet. I decided to pick out some wires for later, so I would be able to get the deed done faster the next time Fellingham wanted blood. As I was picking at the wire, my roommate walked over to my side of the room to see what I was doing. Hey, maybe if I cut myself, then they won't send me home, she mused aloud. No, don't, I told her, not wanting her to hurt herself. Oh, so you want to see me gone too? She turned on me, yelling. A panicky feeling rose up inside me. I shook my head hard. No, that's not it. You just what? She asked me. Racking my overstimulated brain, I worked hard to come up with a sufficient answer. A stroke of brilliance suddenly hit me. I explained my idea to her, speaking more clearly than I had in days. I just don't want you to see you hurt yourself, but I have another idea that might keep you here longer. My roommate's eyes turned softer. She urged me to continue. I dropped my voice to a whisper. Why don't you use the wire to go at Susan? You don't need to actually hurt her with it. You would just kind of lunge at her with it. Enough to scare her and get them to want to keep you here. You wouldn't actually even touch her with it, so they wouldn't be able to get you in any serious trouble. My roommate smiled, a big and devilish grin. She held her hand out for the wire. I dropped it into her hand, pleased with myself at the fact that I had placated my roommate and stopped her from hurting herself, and had come up with a way to get back at Susan. The next few days passed uneventfully. Slowly, I was hearing the voices less, and blood stopped dripping down the walls. There was no para following me around anymore. It was easier to hear people, and I began thinking in fully formed thoughts again. I tried to do what they wanted me to do. Eating became easier, so they finally stopped threatening me with feeding tubes. Everyone congratulated me on how well I was doing. They thought that the new worksheets they were giving me to fill out were helping me learn to behave, even though I just scribbled all over them with different colored crayons. I was just relieved that I could think thoughts and speak without being interrupted by people narrating me my thoughts, or by voices telling me to hurt myself. Slowly, I started talking to my parents again. We were still arguing a lot anytime the subject of my problems came up, but at other times, we had normal conversations. We also talked about fun things we'd do once I got home. My mom promised to bring me to the zoo. She also mentioned the trip to the mall with plans to stop at Build-A-Bear, my favorite store in the world. We made plans to reread the entire Harry Potter series at night before bed together once I was discharged. As promised by Susan in our second family meeting, I'd be going home really soon. Of course, I'm sure a lot of that plan for my upcoming discharge date was dictated more by my insurance and less by my actual mental health needs, as is what usually happens with mental health care in the United States in the 21st century. My plan for my roommate didn't quite work out. I don't know if Susan got scared, but my roommate got sent home anyway. I got back from group and she was gone. I wasn't that surprised. People randomly would just appear and then disappear. I felt kind of bad for her because I knew she didn't want to leave. But I didn't think about it too much. I was too busy being relieved at how clear reality was again. In the car, on the way home from the hospital, I sat in the middle seat in the back so that I could talk to my mom and dad both at the same time, like the other times when I had left the hospital. I felt really light and free and hopeful. Then the subject got brought up. My dad mentioned how I was going to start dialectical behavioral therapy class. I didn't respond to this at first. I just fell silent and stared at the window, hoping someone would change the subject. My dad kept talking. You know, I think it could really help you, Cassie, he told me. You don't want the borderline personality disorder traits to become a part of you. You don't want to get older and become like that roommate you had. What about her? I asked, not understanding what he meant. She was borderline too, Dad explained. Susan told me she got so dependent on the hospital that she had to get escorted out of there by the police. Oh, I answered. Suddenly, I didn't feel so good anymore. I thought of how melodramatic my roommate had been. I couldn't believe everyone thought I had the same problems as her. That sent hurting feelings through my whole body. In my head, I imagined the police escorting her out in handcuffs and dragging her back to that group home she hated. Our plan had failed. Was I really borderline? I had helped her develop our plan. Was it because of our plan that the police got called? A feeling of guilt began settling deep inside me. Maybe I did have borderline personality after all. I didn't speak too much after that. Arriving home didn't feel as exciting as it should have. I was glad to be out of that hellhole hospital where I was constantly getting yelled at and reprimanded. But it seemed like there was nowhere in the world where I belonged anymore. My parents continued to homeschool me, and I continued to go through the motions of life. But inside, I felt like I had been torn apart and then put back together, partially inside out. My parents took me to the place where I could have DBT therapy. About a week after I'd been discharged from the hospital, the head DBT therapist was kind and had a light laugh. She spoke to me calmly as she asked me what I wanted from DBT. I gave her the most honest answer that I could. All I want is to feel better, I told her. She nodded and began explaining how I would meet with an individual therapist once a week and go to DBT skills class once a week. I agreed that I would try it out. My DBT therapist listened to me when I spoke. I told her about my fears, my suffocating depression, the voices, and the strange things that would appear. I told her about getting sucked in and how sometimes my thoughts would get snatched out of my head. I explained about the way I could sometimes hear other people's thoughts as clearly as if they were speaking to me. And I told her about how things were a little better lately. Her name was Leela, and she listened quietly as I poured all this out. When I stopped talking, she simply said, "That seems like a whole lot of stuff to deal with. It must make you feel pretty overwhelmed." I nodded, and I felt very relieved that someone was finally listening to me instead of arguing with me constantly. Leela asked me a bunch of questions, and I answered them as honestly as I could. I had given up on hiding and lying. All it had ever done was make things worse. 50 minutes went by quickly. When our session was over, she handed me a card to fill out. It was called a diary card. I had to rate each emotion I felt on a scale of 1 to 5. I was supposed to do it every day. Underneath that scale was another scale. It was a scale of behaviors like self-harming, suicide attempts, purging, starving yourself, drinking, alcohol, smoking cigarettes, doing illegal drugs, gambling, having sex, looking at porn. I would have to write yes or no next to each behavior on whether I'd been engaged in at any point during the day. And I had to write how bad my urges to engage in the behavior were. I also had to rate those behaviors on a scale of 1 to 5. Leela also told me that if I ever needed to, I could call her on the phone and she'd coach me through a difficult situation by using the DBT skills that I would learn in DBT skills class. DBT class had about 5 other girls in it. Most of them had cuts and scars in various stages of healing, crisscrossing up, down, and across their arms. I wondered if they heard voices too. I wondered if I'd finally found people that would really understand me. You weren't allowed to talk about behaviors like cutting, purging, taking drugs, shoplifting, or anything else like that during class time. It was supposedly too triggering, but I quickly learned in chats between breaks that these girls cut for different reasons. They described feeling numb inside and cutting in order to feel something. They described cutting to release difficult emotions. I was disappointed. None of them mentioned cutting to stop voices only they heard. Once again, I felt different and misplaced. That is the end of Was I Ever Normal, Chapter 22, Under the Borderline. What did you guys think about it? I would love to hear some questions, comments, anything at all. Can't wait till next time, Elaine. There'll be next time, don't worry. And you can also buy the book too. The book is available at Barnes and Nobles. It's available at Amazon. It's available at some independent bookstores. Books A Million. Vivian, oh, good narrative. Oh, thank you. Yeah, it was a cliffhanger. I like doing that to you guys just to torture you. Yeah, it does come and go. Her life changes from chapter to chapter as she realizes and learns new things. Yeah, you can buy it on Amazon. Hang on, let me get the link for you. Hold on. I'm getting the link. That's the link for Amazon. You can order on Amazon right there. You can also order it from Barnes and Nobles. Hold on. Let me get you the link for Barnes and Nobles too. If you can leave like a positive review on it, that'd be really cool on the site. I would really love that. Here, let me get you the link for Barnes and Nobles as well. That's the link for Barnes and Nobles if you want to buy it at Barnes and Nobles too. And you can find it in bookstores too. And it should be in some libraries soon. But the two main places it's in is Amazon and Barnes and Nobles. And it looks like this. This is what it looks like. And you can get it as a Kindle too, or an ebook if you get it off of a Barnes and Nobles or somewhere. Well, I think I'm gonna end here. I love you guys as usual. Thank you so much for coming, and I will see you next time. Take care, everybody. Bye.